The sharp, metallic scrape of a lighter ignited the stale air of the penthouse, a sound more jarring than any scream. I had just informed the city's most formidable business magnate that I was leaving for a date, and her reaction was not a shout, but a silence punctuated by the flicker of a flame. She held my gaze, unblinking, as she lit a slim cigarette, the smoke curling like a ghost between us. The 54th floor of the Sterling Tower didn't possess air. It was a climate-controlled, filtered environment that smelled faintly of ozone and expensive polish. It was engineered to keep you alert and solely focused on the conquest of capital. The clock read 5:42 p.m., and through the towering windows the city sky was bruising into a deep, angry purple, pregnant with the threat of sleet. Inside, the only sound was the aggressive, rhythmic clicking of Victoria Sterling's fingernails against her polished ebony desk. I stood before her, my cheap cotton shirt clinging to the space between my shoulder blades, a testament to the afternoon's tension. I had been Victoria's executive assistant for 3 years, a role that blurred the lines between professional aide, crisis manager, and emotional punching bag. I knew the micro-expressions of her face better than I knew the contours of my own daughter's. A single tap of her index finger meant impatience. A double tap signaled the end of your career. Right now, she was drumming all 4 fingers. It was a new, unsettling rhythm. The Tokyo Logistics, Victoria said, her voice a low, resonant drawl that could command a boardroom or silence a courtroom. She didn't look up from her tablet, her dark hair pulled back into a severe knot that accentuated the sharp lines of her jaw. They need a final sign-off. Sent to your encrypted drive at 3 p.m., I replied, my voice sounding thin against the cavernous silence of the office. The union reps rescheduled for Tuesday. The preliminary concessions are with their legal team. She finally looked up, her eyes the color of a frozen lake before the ice breaks. Good. We need to review the acquisition matrix, pull up a chair, order food. I swallowed, a golf ball-sized lump in my throat. I glanced at my watch, a scuffed plastic Casio held together by tape. 5:44 p.m. The babysitter charged overtime after 6, and my 6-year-old daughter Lily had a meltdown if I wasn't home before the streetlights flickered on. But there was another reason my stomach was churning. I can't, I said, a tactical error that hung in the air. I rarely used her first name, always resorting to Ms. Sterling. Using it now made it personal. Her hands stopped their rhythmic drumming. The sudden silence was absolute, heavy enough to collapse the walls. The faint hum of the HVAC system thrummed like a giant's heartbeat. "Excuse me?" she asked, the temperature in the room seeming to plummet. Her voice was a silken whisper, sharp and dangerous. "I need to leave. Now." I kept my voice level but felt the heat of a flush creeping up my neck. "The matrix details are in the blue folder. I've highlighted the risk factors." "It's all there." Victoria slowly set her stylus down. The click against the glass desk was deafening. She leaned back, steepling her fingers. "You are leaving at 5:45 in the middle of a hostile takeover. Are you ill? Is it an emergency with your daughter?" She always referred to Lily as your daughter, as if my child was an abstract inconvenience rather than a little girl who loved grape jelly. "No, Lily is fine," I said. "Then why?" she pressed, her voice a dangerous whisper. I took a breath, the air tasting of stale coffee and my own anxiety. "I have a date," the words hung in the air, clumsy and foreign. They didn't belong in this room designed for discussing liquidations and corporate espionage. The concept of a date, of nervous small talk and shared appetizers, felt almost profane. Victoria stared at me, her gaze a physical weight. For 5 agonizing seconds she didn't move. Then, very slowly, she reached into the top drawer of her desk. She pulled out a heavy, brushed silver Zippo lighter, a relic from her late father, and a slim black cigarette. She wasn't supposed to smoke in the building, but when you own the building, the rules are a suggestion. She placed the cigarette between her lips. She struck the flint, the flame illuminating her face. casting sharp shadows across the floor-to-ceiling glass. She inhaled deeply, the tip of the cigarette glowing a violent, angry red. She snapped the lighter shut and exhaled a thin plume of grey smoke, the acrid smell hitting the back of my throat. "A date," she repeated, the word sounding like a slur. "Yes." She took another drag, the smoke softening her sharp features for a moment. "With whom?" "That's personal." Her jaw tightened, the muscle feathering near her ear. "Of course, personal. By all means, Samuel, don't let me keep you from your personal life." She dismissed me with a turn of her chair, facing the sprawling cityscape, leaving me staring at the back of her head and a rising plume of toxic smoke. I stood there for a few seconds, feeling like a child waiting for a permission slip that would never come. "Good night, Victoria," I said. She didn't answer. I backed out of the office, the heavy glass door clicking shut behind me with a sense of terrifying finality. In the plush, carpeted antechamber, my heart hammered. I was shaking. Why? It was just a date. I was a 34-year-old single father. I was allowed to have a life. But the lingering scent of smoke felt like a threat, a ghostly hand gripping the back of my neck. I grabbed my discount overcoat from the closet and practically sprinted to the elevator. Pressing the lobby button, I watched the numbers descend, the pressure of the penthouse lifting with each floor, but the knot in my stomach remained. The lobby was a cavern of white marble and brass. Pushing through the revolving doors, the city hit me like a wet towel. The freezing rain had started, a miserable drizzle that seeped into the seams of my clothes. I walked to the subway, the streets a chaotic blur of red tail lights and exhausted faces. The subway station smelled of damp wool, stale beer, and the metallic grind of the rails. Swiping my card, I stood on the platform surrounded by the grey, exhausted faces of the middle class. The grit, the noise, the struggle. That was my world. The 54th floor was an illusion I visited to pay for a tiny apartment in Queens. The train screeched to a halt. I squeezed into a packed car, gripping the overhead bar. My phone buzzed. It was the babysitter. "Lily wants mac and cheese." "Out of milk." "Bring some—" Right. Milk, real-world problems. By the time I got home, bought the milk, and carried Lily, her backpack, a soggy piece of glitter-covered construction paper, and my briefcase up the 3 flights of stairs, it was 6:45 p.m. "You smell yuck," Lily announced as I set her down. "I smell like the subway," I said, peeling off my wet coat. "And maybe a little smoke." "Smoking is bad. Teacher says it turns your lungs into raisins." "A lady at work," I muttered, heading to the kitchen. "And yes, it's very bad." "Is she a bad lady?" Lily asked, climbing onto a stool. I paused, holding the box of macaroni. Was Victoria bad? Ruthless? Yes. She'd dismantled companies and fired thousands. She paid me well but expected my soul. She was lonely, arrogant, and terrifying. "She's just complicated," I told my daughter, pouring pasta into boiling water. I had 45 minutes to transform from a haggard corporate drone into a dateable man. The bathroom mirror was unforgiving, highlighting the bags under my eyes and the grey at my temples. I scrubbed myself under a scalding shower, trying to wash away the smell of the subway and the ghost of Victoria's tobacco. I dressed in my only clean, nice shirt and dabbed on cheap cologne. When the teenage babysitter arrived, I kissed Lily's forehead. "Have fun on your date, Daddy. Don't marry a mean lady." "I'll try my best, Bug." I walked out into the cold night, catching a cab to a mid-tier Italian restaurant in Manhattan. As the cab rattled over the bridge, my eyes drifted to the skyline, naturally finding the towering monolith of the Sterling Tower. The 54th floor was still lit, a single bright square in the dark. She was still there. Alone. I forced myself to look away. Trattoria Bella was aggressively quaint, with exposed brick and cramped tables. Rachel was already there, a second-grade teacher from Lily's school. She looked lovely, safe, in a soft green sweater. Her smile was warm, without a trace of calculation. "Samuel," she said, standing for an awkward half-hug. She smelled of vanilla and flowers, a comforting, normal smell. "Rachel, I'm sorry I'm late." We ordered wine and pasta. For the first 20 minutes it went well. We talked about Lily, the cost of rent, and a funny story about a squirrel in her classroom. I laughed, a sound that felt rusty. I chewed my bread and drank my wine, trying to anchor myself to the present. But beneath the surface, anxiety hummed. My phone was in my breast pocket, feeling like a lead brick. 3 years of Victoria Sterling had rewired my nervous system. I was conditioned to its vibrations. Rachel was talking about her sister's wedding and the florist who botched the order. So now everything is going to be orange. Bright, neon orange. "That's tragic," I said, forcing sympathy. A vibration against my chest, short and sharp. A text, not an email. My hand twitched toward my pocket. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked. "You look like you just got shocked." "Fine," I lied. "Just a muscle spasm, bad desk chair." "You work too hard," she said sympathetically. 2 more buzzes, my heart spiked. Was the deal falling through? Was it a typo in the matrix? The garlic from the bruschetta suddenly tasted bitter. I couldn't focus on Rachel. My energy was violently pulled back to the 54th floor. "Excuse me? Just 1 second?" I said, pushing my chair back. "I need to use the restroom." I navigated through the cramped tables to the men's room, a tiny space smelling of bleach. I pulled out my phone. 3 texts from Victoria. "Where is the secondary file for the Henderson account?" "The formatting on page 4 of the matrix is off by 1/4 inch. "Did you cancel the lobby flowers for tomorrow?" None of these were emergencies. The Henderson file was in the archive. The formatting was an intern's job. The florist was on a contract. She was looking for me. Sitting in her glass palace, staring at the city, actively trying to ruin my evening. Anger flared in my chest. I typed back furiously, "Henderson is in archive 2023. Formatting fixed at 8 a.m. Florist is fine. I am busy." Victoria. I stood by the hand dryer, watching the bubbles appear, then vanish, then appear again. A full minute passed. My jaw was clenched so tight my teeth ached. Finally a response, "Have a pleasant evening." It wasn't a wish. It was a cold, calculated strike. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection showed a compromised man, ignoring a warm, sane woman because he was addicted to the toxicity of his boss. I walked back to the table. "Everything all right?" Rachel asked, her tone more cautious. "Yeah, just work," I said, sitting down. "At 8:30 p.m. "She sounds awful," Rachel said gently. "Awful? Yes. But the truth, the contradiction I couldn't say out loud, was that the silence felt worse than the demands. The date felt hollow. The cozy atmosphere lacked the high-stakes adrenaline of my day job. I felt like a deep-sea diver pulled up too fast, suffocating in normal air. I spent the rest of dinner going through the motions, but I was a ghost. My mind was 54 floors above the city, staring at a woman who smelled of expensive perfume and burning tobacco. Friday morning tasted like burnt espresso and aspirin. I arrived at the Sterling Tower at 6:15 a.m. The lobby was dead quiet. My head throbbed. I hadn't slept. When the elevator doors opened on the 54th floor, the smell hit me first, stale tobacco ash masked by citrus spray. Victoria was already there, standing by the window. Her back was to the room. She wore a tailored ivory blouse and navy trousers, but when she turned, the illusion shattered. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair was frayed. On her desk sat a crystal tumbler with an inch of amber liquid, bourbon, at 6 a.m. "The formatting is corrected," I said, my voice raspy. Victoria didn't look at the matrix. She looked at me, her gaze of physical weight, dragging from my frayed collar to my scuffed shoes. "Did you enjoy your evening?" Her voice was a dry scrape. It was fine, I said, opening my briefcase. Just fine. She walked to her desk, barefoot. I noticed her heels were discarded near the couch, an unprecedented breach of her own armor. For a man who abandoned a multi-million-dollar acquisition, I would hope it was extraordinary. The acquisition is secure, I replied. My personal time didn't compromise the company. Company, she scoffed, picking up the glass. Is that what we're talking about? What else would we be talking about? She stopped swirling the bourbon. You smelled like her, Victoria said. The words stopped the breath in my throat. When you came in yesterday afternoon, you smelled like cheap pine cologne. You never wear cologne to the office. You put it on for her? I was frozen. She hadn't cared about the Matrix. She had smelled my pathetic attempt to smell decent for a date, and it had set her off. You're tracking my cologne now, I asked, defensive anger piercing my exhaustion. Is that in my contract? I notice when things in my environment change, she countered. You broke protocol. I took 2 hours for dinner, Victoria. 2 hours to sit across from someone who doesn't treat me like office equipment. Someone who asks about my daughter. Someone who doesn't text me at 8:30 with fabricated emergencies. The silence was suffocating. I braced for her to call security. Instead, she reached for the Zippo. She lit a cigarette, but her hand was shaking. Cancel your weekend, she commanded, the cigarette bobbing. We are flying to Chicago tonight to renegotiate the supply chain. The jet is prepped for 8. No. The word hung in the air, absolute. She froze, removing the cigarette from her mouth. What did you say? No, it's Friday. I have Lily this weekend. I am not flying to Chicago. I will double your bonus. I will hire a premium nanny. I don't want your money, Victoria. I don't want a stranger raising my kid. I slammed my hand flat against the desk. I'm not going. She stared at my hand. You went for her? You leave for a mediocre teacher who drinks cheap wine, but you won't stay for me. I work for you, I shot back. I don't live for you. She stepped around the desk, the distance between us evaporating. I could smell the bourbon on her breath. Look at yourself, she purred. You're shaking. You hated that date. You hated every second of it because it bored you. That's a lie, I choked, but the lie tasted sour. She tilted her head. You are addicted to the pace. You pretend you want a soft life, but you want the fire. Her touch burned through my shirt. I felt a sick, twisted knot of validation in my gut. She saw the ugly parts of me I hid from Rachel, from Lily. I should have stepped back. I should have left and never returned, but I didn't move an inch. You're suffocating me, Victoria, I said, my voice stripped bare. I'm employing you, she corrected automatically, but her voice was breathless. No, you're consuming me. I looked down at her. You sent those texts last night because you couldn't stomach my attention belonging to someone else. It had nothing to do with the company. Her jaw clenched. My hand moved before I could stop it. I reached up, catching her wrist. She gasped, her eyes widening in shock. No one touched Victoria Sterling. Under my fingers her skin was cool, her pulse hammering. I held her there, locking us in the physical moment. I am going home at 5 today, I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly calm. I am going to make macaroni and cheese for my daughter, and I'm turning off my phone. If you text me, I won't answer. If you call, it goes to voicemail. I'll be back Monday at 8 a.m., not 6. A tremor ran through her arm. I let go. She turned her back instantly, wrapping her arms around herself. The silence was fractured, bleeding. Chicago is a $60 million renegotiation, she said to the glass, her voice hollow. Take the VP of acquisitions. He knows the metrics. She laughed, a dry, bitter sound. He bores me. He agrees with everything I say. Then you'll have a quiet flight. I turned. Every step toward the door felt like walking through cement. I waited for the axe to fall. I reached the door. "Samuel!" I stopped. I didn't turn. I closed my eyes. "What?" Behind me, I heard the sharp clink of the Zippo, then the smell of burning tobacco. "Have a good weekend with your daughter," Victoria said. The words were jagged, forced, dragged out of her throat against her will. It was the closest thing to an apology she had ever made. I opened the door. "See you Monday, boss." The door clicked shut. I walked to the elevator, my legs shaking, my heart pounded. I had won. I'd set a boundary with an apex predator. But as the elevator descended, the victory tasted like ash. I couldn't stop smelling the bitter tobacco. I rubbed my chest where her finger had pressed. I pulled out my phone. Silent. I forced myself to think of Rachel, her warm smile, the easy, safe life she offered. It felt terrifyingly bland. I leaned my head against the cool metal, closed my eyes, and hated myself with profound clarity. Because Victoria was right. I didn't want the quiet. I was suffocating in normal air. The elevator chimed for the lobby, but my mind was still 54 floors up in the smoke, counting the hours until Monday. Samuel walked away. But did he really escape, or just lock himself inside a different kind of cage? The toxic pull of power, possession, and raw ambition is a dangerous addiction, and Victoria Sterling knows how to play the game. If you love dark, realistic tension, hit that like button. Subscribe to Single Dad Stories for more grounded emotional drama, and share this with someone who loves a complex dynamic. Drop a comment below. Who really holds the power?